Welcome to the Darkstream, Voxday, voxday.blogspot.com. Welcome to the Reprehensibles. Welcome to the Unauthorized. Welcome to the VFM, to the Dread Ilk, and to the Bears. Tonight we're going to talk about the prospects for some form of a social media Bill of Rights. We had a bit of a discussion about it on the blog, and it really reminded me of something that Owen commented on when we were talking today. And that was about the fundamental cowardice of far too many conservatives. And it was kind of astonishing to see the way that people were reacting to the Trump administration opening up what is effectively a complaints line, which is quite clearly intended to allow the administration to build its case against the social media companies. We all know what's going on. But before you build your case, before you take action, it's always important to get all your I's dotted and your T's crossed. And, that's what I believe the Trump administration is doing. This is the first step in actually taking action on that regard. You can't just leap in and start complaining that Milo got deplatformed from Twitter or I got deplatformed from Indiegogo or that sort of thing. This is something that affects the American public as a whole. And so, of course, they want to get a broad range of actual stories about normal, everyday Americans that they can then present to the media. And this is an intrinsically political struggle, but it's not an ideological one. And so, in order for the administration to build its case, it needs to have a big quiver of exemplary arrows. And that's precisely what they're doing. I think they're going about it in the right way if they're intending to do something about it. Now, just because they're taking this first step doesn't mean that they actually are going to accomplish anything. We hope they are. Every journey of 1,000 leagues begins with but a single step. But the fact that you've taken that step doesn't mean that you're at your destination. So we shouldn't get overly excited about it. But it is encouraging, especially in light of the way that many people have been rightly complaining about the way that the president has not been defending his supporters against his enemies. And that's been a big problem, especially because it's a tremendously demoralizing thing when you lay it on the line for somebody in support of somebody, and that person can't be bothered to deal with you. That's why I always say loyalty runs both ways. The VFM are, extremely loyal to me. The Dread Ilk are extremely loyal to me, and I hope that they understand that I'm very loyal to them as well in return. That's how strong groups are formed, is with loyalty flowing up and down the chain. And that's one of the reasons why Trump supporters have been demoralized in recent months, for really most of the last year, because Trump appears to have forgotten about the people who put him in office. It's very demoralizing when the president is thumping the table about Venezuela or Iran or Yemen and is ignoring the fact that some of his most outspoken supporters are being actively deplatformed by the various social media companies. And so it's good to see that he appears to be starting to think again about these political issues as opposed to foreign policy, as opposed to the economic stuff going on with China and the trade war. These things are important, of course they are. At least most of these things are important. Obviously, most of the foreign policy stuff is not important at all. And we all wish that. I mean, let me back up. The president has actually been pretty good on foreign policy. He talks a big game, but he never gives the neocons what they want. And so we can hope that that pattern will continue. But at the same time, it's demoralizing to his supporters who want him to be focused on America first, which of course is the campaign promise that he ran on. And so hopefully this opening of a national complaint center about social media is a harbinger of things to come, of a president who is more focused on the issues that are actually important to Americans rather than those that the globalist elite thinks that the president should be paying attention to. And so, we had a lot of people from VP submitting various claims about being kicked off of Twitter, being banned from Facebook. Some people have been banned from YouTube, demonetized by PayPal. But, the thing is that we're not helpless. And we don't need to wait for President Trump to solve our problems. The key thing is you need to be willing to take action. People do get wins. I know of a number of people who have been demonetized, deplatformed by PayPal, and by virtue of going after them, whether it was in arbitration, whether it was in small claims court, etc., they've been able to get their accounts restored. The problem, of course, is that most people don't act. Most people don't do anything. And the social media companies know this. And so you've got all these conservatives who are terrified that if they post the wrong Trump meme, that they're suddenly going to lose the ability to send pictures of their grandchildren or get pictures of their grandchildren or whatever. But that's the problem with living in fear. If you live in fear, or if you're a conservative who only believes in defense, you will lose. Because the social media companies realize that anybody who is acting in fear is not going to fight back if they're deplatformed. People often say, well, how come you don't get deplatformed from various things? My attitude or my usual response is, look at Indiegogo. I guarantee you that they bitterly, bitterly, bitterly regret not simply leaving us alone. And, we have literally hundreds of backers who are lining up to file arbitrations against Indiegogo for breaching its contract with them. And so, that sort of thing is what will keep these companies in line until a legal structure is put in place to force them to act as the public utilities they are. I'm totally unconvinced by the ridiculous conservative appeals to the idea that they're just private, but avoid the penalties that a regular publisher faces. Most of these problems that we see, most of these corporate related problems that we see, are the result of unfair legal advantages being afforded to those companies. If Facebook was simply held responsible for anything that appeared on its site, the way that a normal company would be, you can bet that their behavior would be very different. Alternatively, if they're given immunity, then they shouldn't have any ability whatsoever to interfere with the various ideas and speech being put forth by people using those platforms. What they're trying to do, and the reason that most of these social media companies are so obnoxious, is because they think they're insulated from any responsibility, and so they can do whatever they want without suffering any negative consequences for it. That's not a correct position for them to be afforded. That's not a legal situation that is going to persist for long. It's very similar to the problem I've talked about with regards to artificial persons, or what they call juridical persons, which is what corporations are. Corporations are afforded some of the constitutional rights of natural persons, but they're not held accountable for the responsibilities in the same way that a natural person is. If you commit a certain crime, you go to jail, you are not able to continue your income earning activities. Why is it that a corporation can simply pay a fine? If a corporation can simply pay a fine, why can't an individual? And in fact, usually a fine is a multiple of a natural person's total income, but a tiny, tiny fraction of a juridical person's total income. Why not just base them on percentages? If Google were to commit a crime similar to something that might cost a regular person a fine of $20,000, well, in that case, then Google should have to give up, 30% of its annual revenue, because that's what that amount would be for the regular person. So, hiding behind quasi-libertarian rationales is not convincing, and it's not sensible. The worst argument against this stuff, though, the worst argument against some sort of social media Bill of Rights, is the way some conservatives and even nationalists talk about the fear that these things might be used against them. Yes, it's true. Such legal structures might be used against you, but how is it possibly going to be any worse than unaccountable corporations that hate you being allowed to do whatever they want to you? It's not going to be worse. It is almost certainly going to be better, although there will certainly be new and different problems that will arise. But we would be fortunate to be dealing with those kind of problems. Also, some folks have claimed that it's ironic that I am an anti-free speech ideologue, and I don't hesitate to ban people and moderate my comments. And of course, you're all watching this stream without the ability to chat, and you won't be able to comment on the video either. I've turned them all off. It's not worth it. It's not worth it to me. It's not worth it to most of the people who have communicated with me. It was interesting to see how last night's stream had about 90% of the viewers as normal, within 24 hours. Ran about 9.9 thousand views versus 11 or something. So you're always going to lose a few people, but so what? If they want active engagement, actually, if you back up a second and you think about it, the number of comments was always a very small fraction of the total number of viewers. And of course, people who view the stream later, none of them are involved in the live chat. So the chat is always a relatively small fraction of the total number of viewers, but the downside of the problems in the chat affect everybody. So it makes sense that most people are much happier with a return to this sort of more passive experience where you're just watching and listening. Uh, if I understand a lot of my viewers correctly, they're actually listening to it while they're doing something else, which is fine, which is great. But while it is too bad to lose the ability to have intelligent questions and reasonable interaction, it's simply not worth the massive amount of distraction that isn't just from the trolls and isn't just from the ankle biters. You know, I find even good, well-intentioned questions from genuine fans to be somewhat distracting. And so, you don't have these natural transitions from one topic to another. Things tend to leap all over the place, and it's not conducive to a free-flowing discourse, even though that's what you would ideally have. So, is anything actually going to happen with regards to this proposed or this alleged, suspected, whatever you want to call it, or social media Bill of Rights? I don't know, but the president is clearly signaling that he is looking at this topic and is considering action on the topic. I would hope that he has gotten over his need to bluster and threaten things that he doesn't follow through on. The weakness and the strength, or I should say the weakness and one of the strengths. Excuse me. Another coffee. The weakness of Donald Trump is one of his strengths. He's a great negotiator. The problem with great negotiators is they use negotiation as a hammer, and they think that every problem out there must necessarily be a nail. And that's not true. Sometimes you need a saw. Sometimes you need to war rather than talk. Talk is preferable, but when talk achieves nothing, you need to move to other tactics that are capable of actually accomplishing something. And so I'm optimistic that something will be done, if nothing else then because Donald Trump Jr., who is the best of the whole Trump coterie, he has been talking about it. I'm pretty sure that he's probably very much involved in driving this forward. And frankly, I think it would be a fantastic decision if the president would appoint his son the social media czar and give him significant powers to crack down on Facebook and Twitter and Alphabet and all the other social media companies that have abused their position. And so, it's really kind of depressing. The promise of the internet has been wasted in much the same way that the promise of the end of history at the time of the fall of the Soviet Union has proved to be that opportunity was wasted too. It's disappointing to see that people continually see these opportunities of freedom for everyone as an excuse to try to impose their will on others, to fill the vacuum of power and start using that power and influence to try to control the behavior of others in their own anti-Christian, anti-Western, anti-American way. And that's the most important thing about this possible social media crackdown is civilization requires saving the West from the kind of people that are running these various companies. Mark Zuckerberg is not a creature of the West. In his own mind, Mark Zuckerberg is a potentate of the East. That's how he lives. That's how he thinks. He even imagines himself to be like a Roman emperor, which is exceedingly ridiculous when you think about it. In the same way, these are all people of the lie. So nothing they do is going to be positive in the end. When you look at the way that Jack of Twitter gets summoned to Congress and summoned to the White House to answer for his corporate thought policing, and he just flat out lies about it. I mean, it's kind of amazing to see that when you're one of the people that he's lying about. Now, granted, there's a lot of people that he's lying about, but there's no question that they are imposing ideological police on the country, and that it is having a tremendously deleterious effect on American society and on other societies as well. So, anyhow, that's all I wanted to say about the social media Bill of Rights, other than I think it's a good idea. I hope it's coming, and I think that the correct way to handle these companies is to turn them into utilities. There's a real need for it, and there's plenty of historical precedent. So we'll have to wait and see what happens, but I'm optimistic that at the very least it's going to make these companies considerably more cautious about cracking down on those who don't share their perspective than they have been in the recent past. So, speaking of the arbitration thing, if you're watching this and you were a member of the group action, you should be getting an email very soon. I hope that you will think seriously about participating as an individual, because it will make a difference. It will be helpful to the cause of the backers of Alt Hero Q. So anyhow, that's all I have tonight. I have some calls I need to make before I turn in. So thanks for tuning in. We'll be... I actually should mention one more thing. I did some test streaming on Unauthorized, and I think that's going to... I think we figured out what the problem was. In fact, I know we did. Essentially, XSplit calls the field where you're supposed to put the stream key the stream name. Why they would do it, I have no idea. But every other package, OBS, slobs, etc., they all have a field for the stream key. So anyhow, there's a suggestion for XSplit and Xala for your programmers. Change the name of the stream name field to stream key, and you will probably get fewer tech support calls. So otherwise, I hope you're enjoying some of the new features on Unauthorized. I hope you're enjoying the alternate speed playback, and also don't miss the first episode of The Legend Chuck Dixon on Comics. It's for subscribers, but the first episode is open to everyone. And I've seen the first 10 so far, and they're all just fascinating. And I'm not somebody who is historically a comics book guy, so I don't know some of the names of the greats and stuff to whom he occasionally refers, but the picture that he paints of 1970s New York, I think will be very, very interesting for younger viewers who don't know anything about that era, the pre-Giuliani era. So in any event, that's all we have tonight. So thanks for tuning in. This is the Darkstream. I'm Vox Day.